Serious Reddit, what situation or issue caused you to walk away from a friendship without another word to your friend again? She said, I'm sorry, but I have my own issues to worry about. After I told her my father had just died unexpectedly. My best mate in high school. Top bloke, shirt off yaback kinda fella. We experienced everything together, all the pre and post pubescent stuff. First fuck around with illegal stuff, drugs, drinks, you name it. At the time both of us were heavily involved in trafficking, weed through our respective schools, and due to my size I was a debt collector of sorts for kids who had stiffed the local dealers. Then through an unfortunate series of events, I cleaned myself up and dropped anything that wasn't legal. Doubt though, he was having too much fun doing his thing. We still caught up as often, but this time I was just on the piss, not shooting deer or smoking dope. He would always ask, I would always decline. This pissed Doug off to the point he cut contact with me one day, really abruptly. Didn't feel the need to pursue a reason. Fast forward about 10 years, Ma rings me, tells me that Doug had rocked up at my folks asking to catch up and bury the hatchet as he was clean. So she gave him my address, and he was coming over. The missus didn't know about Doug and was fast asleep anyway, so I just left the door open a crack so I could hear his car pull up. Had a real bad feel in it though, to the point where I grabbed the pacifier, a length of thick regime I'd fashioned into a cudgel from my high school woodwork days that I usually keep near the door, and slid it hidden from sight near the couch. Still don't know why. Moments later, hear a car pull up. I go outside to meet him, and could immediately tell something was up. Firstly, Doug was fucking flying, pupils like 5-cent pieces. So much for being clean. Second, instead of his crappy Holden we used to bomb around Broadien, he was driving some old Volvo. Now I know his family was the same as mine. Pretty much boggin, welfare, and he had Holden lovers, so it struck as odd as hell. We used to nick a few cars for insurance jobs back in the day too. Damn, I haven't thought about that in years. Anyway, after an awkward handshake, I motion him around the back to the shed, basically my man cave. Hit the lights, grab a beer and toss one over to him. Fuck me, he had a rough time. Thin as a whip now, couple of dodgy neck and facial tats. He was pretty fidgety, I guess from the gear he was obviously on. He was rambling about his stint inside, not surprising, how his family had all moved back up north, and how he was clean now. I stopped him there and called him out. Basically said bullshit, can't remember exactly what I said. He insisted it was from cold medicine or something. PFFT. The whole time he was looking around the shed, but only at certain things. Expensive things. Power tools. Gym kit. My gun safe in particular. I didn't like where this was going, so told him we can catch up later on the week or something. I gotta go to bed. He was cool with that, smiled, patted me on the back, and jumped back in his car after I walked him out. I stick me head into say yeah, checked the ignition. Of course there was no key. Couple of days later, I note the gun safe had pry marks on the paint. Now this fucker is locked up good solid steel, anchored to the concrete. It ain't opening unless I open it. Aussie law is pretty hardcore with that shit. Call up the cops, tell them what's happened. They come around and have a squiz. I'll let them know I'm pretty sure I know who tried to open it. Gave them Doug's full name, left it at that. Haven't heard from the bloke in near 15 years. Frankly don't care if I do. Our daughters went to preschool together, and so we started socializing, with play dates twice or 3 times a week for about a year. The kids would play, and we would drink coffee and chat. When I had to take my husband for surgery, she offered to watch my kid. It was the very first time she'd ever watched her without me there. I came back a few hours later to find my 3-year-old sitting in a corner looking as if she'd been crying. The ex-friend launched into this really detailed story about how my daughter had repeatedly tried to take a toy from her daughter, and so she'd had to give her a timeout, and my daughter was upset at the discipline. Got my kid in the car and asked what had happened. She said that she and her friend had argued over a toy. Ex-friend had gotten right into her face and screamed at her, so close that she had sprayed my daughter's face with spittle. Then ex-friend slapped her and slammed her into the wall. I pulled over and felt the back of my kid's head. There was a big lump on it. So we turned around and drove straight to the police station. The police interviewed me and my daughter. I later found out that they sent officers to interview ex-friend, and on the strength of their observations, Child Protective Services was brought in. She'd been beating her daughters fairly regularly with a belt. There were lots of injuries in various stages of healing, including a broken rib. Ex-friend got a suspended sentence and lost custody of her 2 children to her mother-in-law until she worked through an anger management and parenting program. I don't know if she ever completed it. Here's the worst part. I spent 2 or 3 hours a week with that woman for a year, and I had no clue she abused her children. None. Nothing she said ever raised red flags. I never saw her threaten or physically discipline her kids in public. Her daughters were very quiet and well behaved, maybe a little too eager to please adults, but nothing really remarkable. She never left marks in visible places. John has enlightened me to the white man's plight and to the threat of the Jew. I cannot abide my brother bedding a Jew without intervening. If you continue to see that woman, I will kill both of you. Probably the darkest part of my life. This was my best friend of 11 years, a surrogate brother, and integral part of my childhood, and he'd threatened to kill me and an innocent woman because of her religion. There were no classic warning signs, no slippery slope, at least that I saw. He just started hanging out with some punk kid, and a few weeks later his head was shaved, and he was a big fan of eugenics. I haven't talked to him since. Chris, if you're reading, I'm sorry I wasn't a strong enough friend to get you out there. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you from whatever made you so hateful. I hope you've come past your anger, and I hope you're happy. I still think of you often. You're the reason I survived as long as I have. Growing up, I didn't have many close friends. I was a bit of a social outcast, a bit of a loner, and it wasn't until after college when I truly met friends whom I cared about like family. The sad part is I cared about them like family, but it seemed like they didn't feel the same way about me. Flash forward about 10 years. I've had these friends for a long time and I considered them my very best friends. My dad became suddenly ill. I contact my friends, give them the heads up that my dad wasn't doing well. They said, whatever you need, we are there for you, man. My dad quickly gets worse and eventually passes away. I of course give my friends the heads up, tell them he passed. I get the "so sorry man" and the like. I then pass word about the dates and times for the funeral and wake. They didn't show up. I can understand if they had work or no car, and I had a couple of friends whom honestly and wholeheartedly couldn't make it. I also had friends who did. But these close friends couldn't even have bothered to at least call to say they couldn't go or apologize for not going. This single action by them killed a 10-year-long friendship. The sad part is, they went out of their way when another friend's mother passed away years ago. But for my dad, nothing. One of my best friend's girlfriend, that I had known for 3 years, very good friend with both of them, had this crazy thought that I was in love with her and tried to steal her from him. He believed her, and so did a lot of my other very good friends. I told them, if that's what you think of me as a person after all these years, then fuck off. This was during a party after we graduated. Fuck her for manipulating my friends. I thought that I loved her. We had been friends with benefits for 2 years. She initiated the kissing, and I had taken her home. As she got out of the car that I drove her 40 miles just to get home in, I ran out to give her a goodbye hug, which she graciously accepted. Then she proceeded to tell our mutual best friend that I came at her. She was genuinely scared, and she didn't know if she should press charges or not. Quote, I thought he was going to rape me. End quote. I wish that was the actual end, but there was one more time that she called. A couple weeks later, she told me she was stranded far away from her apartment and she needed some help. While I was furious that she had done this shit to me, I decided to help. My friends and I picked her up. I didn't talk to her at all, and then my real best friend suggested, hey, why don't we get something to eat first? Because he didn't know what had happened between the chick and I. Everyone loved the idea except me. We went to a restaurant and I literally pretended to have an important phone call and walked around the neighborhood, too sick to my stomach to be near the table, until my best friend called me and said we should get going. We dropped the chick off but before we did, she said, "Hey, I just wanna be honest with you," and she then told me that the reason she was stranded was because she had went to a person's house to have sex with them, and she needed a ride home. I told the driving friend, "Let's get out of here." I never spoke to her again, even though she tried to text and Facebook me many times. Found out that a couple of friends of mine had a secret hobby they were keeping behind my back. They were basically pretending to be interested in depressed, insecure girls who were depressed and overweight with acne, so they would send them nudes and then turn around and embarrass and humiliate them. Fuck that. Like, that's just fucking cruel. It wasn't limited to just overweight insecure girls, but that was their main target, because it was more fun to pick on people with low self-esteem for them. I'm a pretty laid back and easygoing guy. I will do favors for friends and go out of my way to help. I had one friend who would take advantage of those trays. He'll let it go for it a while, but if the taking never stops and favors are never returned, he'll walk away without ever looking back. The last straw for me was when a friend asked if I wanted to come over after day party we had for a friend. He said he would drive and I could leave my car there and get it in the morning as it was right on the way to work. So I said sure and went with. On the way home, he stopped to fill up and demanded gas money since he drove. He didn't ask, he demanded I pay half. I just got out, closed the door and walked away. When your best friend of 12 years decides to tell some random girl he was fucking, a pretty deep personal secret I have that only he and my immediate family know about. She proceeded to spread it around. Needless to say, my reputation was pretty much permanently tarnished, so I had to move away. So, I joined the army. Witnessed a gambling addiction swallow my friend's life up whole. Kid started innocently enough at 17. Got a fake and went to one of those casinos that really couldn't give a fuck what age you actually were, as long as you don't win. He lost every penny he had to his name up until that point. Had his fake taken from him that night too when he got pulled over on his way home. He then swiped his brother's debit card one day and ran him dry on an online casino. His parents banned his IP from the internet to prevent this in the future. So in turn he goes out, tells me he needs $100 for an emergency, and goes out and buys a shitty laptop with it. He then swipes his mom's credit card and runs a $4K tab on that again on an online casino. Fast forward about a year now, I got over the whole laptop thing since I was working and didn't really care too much about $100. He tells me and a bunch of other people he's doing a fake it order. We're all about to go to college, so it made sense to get in on this. Give him the money, take the photos, everything seems smooth. Wrong. The kid takes the money, about $1, $5K of his friend's money, buys himself a fake, then goes to the casino and loses it all. After this I basically told him to go fuck himself, but got begged by both mine and his parents to stay in touch because he needed support now more than ever. That same summer before college, kid decides he wants to make another casino run. Asks me to chill one day. Long story short, kid had the balls to ask me if I wanted to rob a fucking house with him. I got in a fight with the kid, and from what I understand he actually still did it. Didn't get caught either. Worst part about it is, from what I understand, he robbed his grandparents, since he knew where they kept their valuables. I don't talk to this kid anymore, but from what I understand he later took his tuition money for college or something along those lines and basically gambled all of it. All I know now is that he's a college dropout and works at Burger King. The part that keeps me up at night is that part of me thinks I could've done more. Like, I could've just taken his keys so couldn't go to the casino. Or I could've told his parents, who are extremely good people, when and where he was heading when I knew. I don't even know what to think of the kid anymore, because he truly was a great friend at first, but something just clicked one day and the kid just couldn't stop gambling. I really thought he had hope when he went to college, as his first 2 years he really did well, but his junior year, last year, something went awfully wrong and it all fell apart. I changed some of the info here, because I didn't have the heart to completely put someone's life out there for fucking karma, but I hope someone out there reads this, and maybe it helps them keep someone you thought would be your best friend forever when you were a kid. One time when I was around 12, me, my best friend, my older cousin, and my best friend's older brother were hanging out. My cousin was good friends with my best friend's older brother. So we were all hanging out, playing basketball, shooting the shit, and my cousin mentioned to everyone that he had gotten a blowjob from a guy before. I already knew this because I was that guy. So my best friend and his older brother were curious and asked him who it was. That's when he looked right at me. He stared at me for a solid 3 seconds. My best friend and his older brother knew at that point. My cousin may as well have came out and said it. All I remember is that they kept asking me and wouldn't drop it, and I literally had no words to say about it. I have never been so humiliated in my entire life before or since that moment. I went inside and told my mom that I really wanted to go home, and we left shortly afterwards. I avoided my best friend like the plague and I moved out of state a few months later. I was gonna move anyway due to something completely unrelated. I couldn't look him in the eyes, him knowing that about me. After several failed attempts to cheer her up / comfort her during a mental breakdown, I asked her what I could possibly do to help her, and she essentially told me to figure it out. It was a long distance friendship, and up to that point, she had been showing more noticeable signs of mental instability, and it was becoming a burden to talk to her because I became the scapegoat for her problems. I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I stopped talking to her. About 4 years later, she sent me a message saying she couldn't remember why we stopped talking, but that she was sorry for whatever happened. After going through some of her social media, she seemed a lot happier / healthier, so I welcomed her back into my life. We don't talk often, but I'm happy this story has a happier ending.